Thanks, Dave.
Welcome. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Not at all. Hello, I'm Ron Geidinger, and I'm very, very happy to be here. It's a real privilege to be given the opportunity to introduce your keynote, Kendal Netmaker. I'd like to give you a couple of words about Tech Canada, which I've been affiliated with for the past 5 years, first as a member when I was running a business, and then later and now as a chair for a couple of CEO groups where we bring CEOs together to work on their stuff, their opportunities, their challenges, their issues. Have you, as an entrepreneur, ever found that you've got a personnel problem, that they're not performing just the way you would like them? Have you ever tried to figure out, well, how do I close the deal with my next client? Have you ever tried to figure out, what about this leadership piece that I'm now got a bunch of people that depend on me to help put bread on their table and to be able to lead them to doing the next right thing for my business, for my customers, for my stakeholders? Well, that's what we gather our CEOs in our groups to do, to pool the expertise, the experience, the sage wisdom in a room together so that 12 to 16 of them have minds that can be applied to the individual opportunities and challenges and issues that any one member has. Just this week, did that for an IT business in town here who was having difficulty getting his people aligned. I worked with a lady just yesterday on how to close the deal. Those are things that face each and every one of us. And believe me, a dozen minds around the issues you face really is a compelling concoction to help you work it. Working with Kendal, I've had a chance to meet him this morning, and he began living on the Sweetgrass Nation, and he's never had a chance as a child to participate in after-school sports. In grade 5, a friend of his lent him some clothing and equipment, and he never forgot what that friend did. And it led him to found a popular sports clothing brand called Nietzsche Gear. It's a lifestyle apparel brand that empowers youth through sports, and through a portion of the profits helps fund underprivileged youth to take part in sports. After finishing 2 degrees at the University of Saskatchewan, Kendal grew the brand from a small one-bedroom apartment through to kiosks and a few pop-up stores, and recently opened a new headquarters in Saskatoon. The brand is now sold to consumers across North America through other exclusive retail partners and online. He recently launched a new company, Netmaker Enterprises, with a focus on helping others turn their passion into a business. He and his company have won many awards, provincial, national, international, one being the Youth Business International Award, and he was awarded that in the United Arab Emirates. His entrepreneurial spirit has taken him around the globe, and he's a very sought-after speaker. And aside from running his business, he's on a mission. The mission to empower young leaders across Canada by showing people that regardless of where you come from and what you've gone through, you can change it. And he was sharing with me how his association with one of my colleagues, Paul Martin in Regina, another tech chair like mine, has mentored him and helped him bring those missions into fruition. Please welcome Kendal Netmaker to the podium.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Hello, Calgary. How's it going this morning? Going awesome? Awesome. So I want to say that it's been an honor to be here today. You know, I'm coming from Saskatoon today, not quite like Calgary. I am a little jealous. Went for a jog downtown the other day. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city you have. You should be very proud. And to be here today to share with you some success secrets and a little bit about my story of how you could take where you are and go anywhere you want in your life. I'm going to share with you some things that will help you. Now, before I do that, I want to talk more about tech and how I got into tech and talking with Paul and meeting Ron this morning. You see, a few years ago, 5 years ago, I was an up-and-coming entrepreneur in Saskatoon, doing my business, and at a networking event, similar to the one that's happened today, I met a man named Paul Martin. Little did I know that Paul was the chair of the Saskatchewan chapter for the Tech Canada group. And Paul gave me his business card, like that happened this morning. We gave each other business cards. And I emailed Paul. And ever since then, we've had a working relationships, and he's been my mentor since that day. At the time, I could not afford to be part of this group, this elite group of mastermind people, executive CEOs in Saskatchewan. And I told Paul that. But Paul said, you know what, Kendal, I see something in you. And ever since that moment, he's invited me to the monthly meetings and so on. But up until this point now, I get asked to go and speak across Canada, so I can't commit to the monthly meetings. But he still invites me to those meetings. Powerful guy, which has brought me here today to speak with everyone in this room. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about my background, where I come from, so you'll understand the things that I'm going to share with you here today. So I grew up in this place called Sweetgrass First Nation, Saskatchewan, west of North Battleford, 25 minutes drive. I grew up single-parented by my mother on Sweetgrass. I'm the eldest of 3 younger siblings. I grew up around females my whole life, so a lot of what I'm going to tell you has been influenced by females. I grew up, part of my life, raised by my mother's mom. In my language, we call them my kukam. So for a while, my kukam raised me because my mom broke her arm when she was single parenting us, so she couldn't carry me. Then I learned from my mother, my sisters, my aunties, and so on. Grade 1 to grade 2, I was going to Sweetgrass Elementary School. And my mother decided that she was going to take me out of the school and put me into a different place. For the very first time in my life, I had to get uncomfortable. Everyone has gone through this thing I'm going to talk about, is being uncomfortable. And in grade 3, I had to go to this place called Cut Knife. Anyone ever heard of Cut Knife in Saskatchewan? If you haven't heard of it, world's largest tomahawk. If you get a chance, drive through there. So in Cut Knife, it's about 500 people in this town, and it's a farming community, so I'm getting bussed in from my First Nations community to Cut Knife. And the very first day I walk into this place, I'd never been so terrified in my life, because I was one of the lone First Nations kids in this school, and I knew that I had to make friends, otherwise I probably wouldn't fit in after a while. And I wanted to fit in. So I made a decision that I was going to make friends. So the very first day I walk into the school, and I noticed for the first couple hours that people are talking about one main topic, farming. So I thought, I'm going to start asking my friends about this farming stuff. So at recess, I noticed that a lot of my friends were playing over here soccer, some were playing over here on the apparatus, and I said, I'm going to ask these kids some questions. So I'd walk up to a couple guys and they'd say, hey, how are your crops doing, man? How much rain you get last night? I didn't know what I was talking about. But I was trying to adapt and trying to bridge a connection. But it worked. I was able to bridge a connection, and finally I was able to make some friends, and we began to play soccer every day at recess. By the time I was in grade 5, that's when my life changed for the first time. That's when I got the opportunity of a lifetime. So in grade 5, I had been playing soccer every recess, and there was only one kid out of the entire school who asked me this one question. He wasn't even from this country. He was from South Africa. His father brought him here as immigrants, and he made a life for them out of nothing. He's a doctor. And his name is Johan. Johan said to Kendal, Johan said, why aren't you playing soccer after school? I had to explain to Johan at 10 years old that I didn't have a vehicle. We're living on social assistance. There's no economic development on my First Nations community. The closest city is North Battleford, 30 minutes away. My mom couldn't work. So I had to explain to him that I could not play this sport. Very simple thing that I could not play. He told his parents that night, and his father, who brought them here from South Africa, heard my buddy's story. And the very next day, Johan's father and mother started to pick me up from Sweetgrass First Nation. They would drive me to Cut Knife. They paid for my $50 registration fee to play on this team, and they helped me by taking part in this sport, soccer. Never forgot about that. Grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, every single weekend I'm trying to be at his house because I love to be at his house, become best friends. The one thing I took away from this family was his father's work ethic. You see, there's a saying that if you wanted to be successful, find successful people and do what they do. So at a very young age, I was watching my best friend's father work. Every time he'd be at home, he'd make time for his kids, but every time he'd be working, he'd be so focused in his work. Every time he'd look after himself, he'd be running like marathons around the lake that he was living at. It was crazy. He was a workhorse. I couldn't believe how much drive he has. That's why it says driven up here. I couldn't believe how driven he was. So, by the time I was in grade 7, they had to move away. And that was my ride going to be taken away from me. I was getting nervous. You ever lose something in your life and you're getting a tight chest and you don't know what's going to happen? I felt that day. So in grade 7, before they leave, they left us something, a gift. Who knows what a 1986 Crown Victoria looks like? Put your hands up, please. All right. It's about as big as that screen up there, okay? They gave us a 1986 Crown Victoria. It was sitting in their parking lot. They weren't using it. They were moving away to Saskatoon. And they said to my mom, here's a gift that you'll be able to help your son and your daughters to continue to play more sports or whatever else they want to do with their life. So now my mom is driving myself, my sisters to more sporting events. I'm playing more sports. By the time I'm in high school, I'm playing volleyball. And volleyball was the sport that changed my life and took me places. In grade 10, this is how one person can change many people through sport. So in grade 10, I walk into this gymnasium, a little bigger than this theater, and again, for the second time in my life, I was so terrified because all the kids in this gymnasium knew each other. And here was this small little kid with no confidence from the First Nation community walking to this gym trying to make this team. At the end of the tryout, I was being so negative to myself in the back of my mind saying, why are you here? You should not be here today. You're probably not going to make the team. I guarantee you, most people have felt like that one time in your life. I was walking to the exit sign. And before I got my hand on that handle, the coach said, Kendal, come here for a second. He already knew my name. I took my hand off that handle and I walked to the coach. His name was Doug. And Doug said, Kendal, you know, I see a lot of potential in you. I want to work with you. You might not get a lot of playing time this year, but I want you to stay on my team. I see a lot of potential in you. You see, up until this point in my life, my father wasn't really in my life. I told you, my mom single-parented us. She sacrificed a lot for us. My father was there, but he wasn't there. He chose to be there when he felt like it. So here was a guy who I didn't know who said, I see potential in you. Powerful words. That's how words changed my life. I stayed on his team. He was my next mentor in my life. And grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, I was finally graduating high school, team captain of the volleyball team that he mentored me through, and I was ready to take on the world. Or so I thought. I was thinking, a lot of my friends are going to university. I want to try and apply and see what happens. I applied to the University of Saskatchewan, seeing what would happen. I get the letter in the mail, and it said, sorry, we cannot accept you. You see, up until this point, the sport of volleyball took me to this place, but it was my academics that lacked to get me into university. But it didn't stop me, because a week later, a coach who was moving to Fort McMurray, Alberta, to go to Keynote College and coach the men's volleyball team, said, Kendal, come to Alberta, we can get you into the college, play here for a few years, and then you can see what happens. So in 2005, I moved 9.5 hours away from home, and I went to Fort McMurray, Alberta to go to school. Ironic, right? It was in the you know, the booming economy, right? It was the boom town, right? And everyone was going there for work, and I would tell people, like, I'm going there to go to school. They look at me like I was crazy. So I went to Fort McMurray to play some volleyball. I took some university classes. 2 years later, I can barely walk up these stairs without almost falling over because the sport had taken that much out of my knees. I was taking such a beating from it. So I needed to make a new goal for myself. My next goal was to finish university. I applied back to the University of Saskatchewan. I got into the arts and science program. 2 weeks before classes start, this is the power of your phones, okay? Most likely everyone in this room has a smartphone. So this is the power of using your phone. 2 weeks before classes started, I noticed that there was an advertisement of the program where I got rejected from in high school. It was the education program, and there was a number there to call for more information. So I picked up my phone. I was a summer student at the time, and I called the number. The director just happened to answer the phone. His name is Orest Morosky. I said, hello, Orest. My name is Kendal Netmaker. I am from Sweetgrass First Nation. I tried to apply to your program after high school, never got in. What do I got to do to get in your program? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes later, I was in the program. The original program I had got rejected from in high school. So I went to the University of Saskatchewan thinking I'm going to become a teacher when something changed. I'd always remember what my buddy Johan had done for me as a kid. I always remembered that, okay? And when I got into university, I was finishing my third and my fourth year. I was almost finished when amazing things happened. I started to see these advertisements of business competitions, business planning competitions, business pitch competitions. And I thought, you know what, I kind of have a cool business idea of creating a brand. I didn't know what a business was at the time. I just knew that I can create a brand that would give back to kids the way I was helped as a kid by my buddy Johan. How can I create a brand like that? I had no idea how to start a business plan or nothing. So I knew my first problem was I need to write a business plan. So I found people in the business community in Saskatoon. I would take them out for coffee. Couldn't afford Starbucks yet, so I took them out for double doubles. And I had a notepad and pen. This is the year the iPad first came out, so I couldn't afford that either. So I had a notepad and pen taking notes. 2 weeks later, I had a business plan. It was pretty bad, but I handed it in anyway. And I was invited into stages like this to pitch to judges my idea. I didn't know what a business pitch was, so I had to YouTube how to do a business, how to do an elevator pitch, Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, how do these people do it? So I would lock myself in on the campus late at night in the theaters and speak to no one until I finally had the confidence to get up on a stage and deliver a pitch without breaking down in nerves. My very first presentation, I was in the back of the room, very similar theater. I was in the back doing jumping jacks, doing push-ups, and by the time I got up there, my face was just drenched with sweat. My heart was just racing, and man, I finally got it out. But that was the key, was showing up. I didn't want to be there, but I was terrified, and I showed up. Then I started winning some money. I started to win business plan competition money. Now I had my startup capital to start buying some t-shirts, putting my branding on it, called Nietzsche Gear. How did Nietzsche Gear come around? Well, Nietzsche is actually a slang form of friend in my language. Nichiwagan. Nichiwagan, my friend, my partner. It was my friend who impacted this brand, so it's basically called Friend Gear, with the mission to help fund underprivileged kids to take part in sports. In 2011, I was doing out of my one-bedroom apartment in Saskatoon. My son, who wasn't even 1 year old, was crawling around these boxes of clothes in our living room. People are coming all hours of the day, and I'm selling out of my wireless debit machine. They're literally buying out of my closet. 2 months later, we got an office in Saskatoon where we put all that stuff into a little tiny 100-square-foot office. Same thing, we're selling nonstop, things are happening. 2 weeks later, we won a kiosk in the local mall, rent-free for 3 months, our biggest opportunity. Some people call this luck. I call it working hard and luck finding each other, okay? When you work hard, you're gonna attract various things into your life. It doesn't happen unless you work hard for it. And I was grinding nonstop. So finally, we get this kiosk. I'm there. I have to find some employees. Didn't have any employees. My very first employee was double my age, so people thought she was my mom. So every time people would come there, they'd be like, "How's your son doing?" And she was kind of embarrassed and whatnot. So after 2012, shortly after that kiosk, we opened up our first store in the mall. After that, we opened up various pop-up stores in various cities. Pop-up store is basically a short-term rental where we go try out different markets. Then we open up an online store, and then we open up our wholesale market where we started to wholesale our brand to other retailers. We started to do custom orders for corporations and so on. And the things that were happening, 2013, 2014, we're winning awards and so on. 2015, I make a decision. Because at this time in my life, I have 3 different stores, and I'm like in my vehicle every single day, going to this store, going to this store, that store, that store. And I'm like a hamster in a wheel, squeak, 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 going nowhere. Squeak, squeak, squeak. You ever see those people? Like, they don't go anywhere, right? They're just burning themselves till they fall and pass out. I was in that situation. So I made a decision that I need to start finding a way to grow this business more effectively. And at this time, I was getting asked to go and speak in different places. So I developed and I started to research people who were speakers, who did seminars. I started to get more involved in the tech circuit. I started to ask Paul more questions. Paul would bring more speakers that I can learn from to learn how to share my story, to help people share their messages and so on. So I want to share with you the 3 secrets to success, because shortly after I made that decision, I created an academy called Netmaker Academy where I help entrepreneurs across Canada who want to start and grow their businesses. I go and do keynote presentations and so on. The very first thing that I want to share with you is to use your pain for gain. See, when I was a kid, everyone has a story in this room. When I was a kid, I used to wonder why, growing up, some friends didn't want to be my friend because of my skin. I used to wonder why my mother was the only person that raised me, why my father wasn't in my life. I used to wonder why people abuse drugs and alcohol in my communities. I used to wonder why my sister, who I grew up with, got almost killed to death by an abuser. My own sister went through something that was so traumatic that I never thought would happen to someone in my family. 6 days after she gave birth to her daughter, her partner literally almost beat her to death with the baby in his arm. Crazy things were happening. I used to wonder why these things were happening in my life and to my family. I used that pain. I used all those things, and I fueled it into trying to become successful. You need to do the same thing too. In Calgary, we talk about the people that were in these videos this morning. They used all the things that have happened in the past, and now they're starting businesses. They're being innovative. When your back's against the wall, that's when you find talents and abilities that you never even knew you had. Number 2 is empower yourself. 2014, I was in the audience, I was speaking in front of a high school, and at the end of my presentation, someone comes and walks from the back of the room and gives me a sticky note. And on the sticky note, I couldn't read it at the time. I put it in my pocket and I said, I'll check it out. He said, I want you to YouTube this, Kendal. I don't even know who the person was. That Christmas week off, it was on my monitor. And I YouTubed this person. And on the sticky note, it said, Les Brown, you deserve. I realized that I just YouTubed one of the best motivational speakers on the planet, and I was hooked. From that day forward, I was committed to personal development. I was working on myself. I started buying more books. I started going to take online courses. I flew myself to Toronto to listen to Tony Robbins, to Les Brown, to Bob Proctor, Joe Polish, and all those kind of guys. I wanted to learn from the best. Empower yourself. Work on yourself. Because once I started to work on myself, my outer world got better. Number 3, my very first presentation, keynote presentation. I was in the room, a little bigger than this, but it was old school. And there was a rickety old staircase right here. And the whole time before they called me up to go and speak, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, oh, I sure hope I don't trip on that staircase, because you can go on it, they literally go like this on it. It was ready to fall apart. And I was thinking the whole time, I hope I don't trip on that staircase. What do I do when they call me up to go and speak? I trip. I could gash my leg. I could feel some blood trickling down. People are laughing at me in the back of the audience. My face is beet red. And of course, at the time, my heart is racing. I have some sweat coming down. And then I finally get up onto the podium. And I get up onto the stage, and all you hear is this, literally my voice shaking. And I can't even talk. And you hear rustling of papers, because all I had was a little paper of the notes I was going to talk about. That was my first presentation. Had I let that situation stop me from ever speaking again, I wouldn't be here today. So one person can change the world. One person changed my world, allowed me to play sports. You all have that gift in this room. You all have abilities here in this room as a city. Look at the things you've done in your city right now. Calgary, every single time I hear Calgary, people are talking about how beautiful it is and how awesome it is to live there. My wife wants to live here. Literally, we were here like last summer, and we were driving through the Banff, and she's like, Kendal, if we're going to settle down somewhere, I want to live here. I'm like, oh, boy, that's a lot of pressure. Okay, I'll work very hard, and we'll see what happens. So I believe I'm here for a reason. You're all here for a reason. You follow these 3 steps, I guarantee you will see results in your life that will change you, the perspective of Calgary, and continue to make it the #1 destination in Canada. Thank you so much for having me. Have an amazing day.
Thanks, Kendal.